What have been some of the greatest maps that you've created or used in your own game, and how have you used them? Share down below. Inspire us with your creativity. It's been amazing to see all your comments in the previous videos. Let's keep it up. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of How to Be a Great GM. My name is Guy, and today we get to do the step that I love the most. We've been talking theory so far in terms of creating your own world space. We've been looking at your goals and constraints and how do you set everything up so that you can create this world space. We've looked at all of that. Now it's time to actually do it. Sorry, me slapping my hands. I get enthusiastic. I absolutely hate making maps. I love making maps because you get to explore and express your creativity. I love it because you get to explore your creativity and you get to express stuff in your maps and to add in little details that hopefully your players are going to be going, ooh, I want to go there. What's happening there? I like that. I like this. You also get to start setting parameters for your game. So there's lots of very interesting things that you can add into your map when you're making a map. At the same time, though, it is a laborious process. There is no quick fix. Now, there are lots of pieces of software out there that allow you to create some very beautiful maps very, very quickly. Certainly a lot faster than drawing them by hand. The limitations, of course, is that they sometimes just don't have the assets that you need. So in today's video, I'm going to talk to you about the principles of map making in terms of what we need to do as a GM in terms of creating our own world space. And then at the end of the video, I'm actually going to show you some of the tricks that I use when I'm drawing my own by hand, not using anything that requires anything from anyone. That's not to say that you shouldn't. There are amazing pieces of software out there, and there's one that's coming up, which I know I will be using extensively in my map making, but it's not yet out. So without any more waffle on that one, before we go anywhere, we've got to pay for the bills, only this time it's a product that I made myself, and it has very much to do with map making. The Epic Battle Maps Volume 1, which you can download off of our website, www.greatgamemaster.com. Now, when you are making your purchase, use the code EPICLOOT10 to get a massive 10% discount off your order. Now, these maps unfold into these huge spaces that you can play on using our lay flat binding technique. So as you can see, suddenly you have a massive 32-inch long map that you can play on. Now, obviously, all of the maps are dry erasable, so you can make all kinds of marks, indentations, or deadly traps for your players' PCs to wander into. And of course, as they make their check, they pass, they don't fall into the trap, and so you might as well just erase it off of the board, which you can do, of course, with our dry erase maps. Epic Battle Maps Volume 1, it's as big as it's gonna get in a regular-sized book. It all comes to you from us and Dungeon Fog. Find it on our website, www.greatgamemaster.com. I had a lot of fun working on that project, and a little birdie's told me that maybe there might be another volume coming soonish. TM. Watch this space. Battle maps aside, we need to talk about our world map, or at least our world space map. So the very first thing that we need to look at is we've got our goals. We've worked out what is it that we wanted to do in our world space. What do we want our players to do? We've worked out that kind of idea. Now we need to start looking at the actual land masses themselves. Are we going to build a galaxy? Are we going to build a world? Are we going to build a country? Are we going to build a region? We need to know what we're going to build first, or what we're going to draw first, I should say, not really build. How do we determine how much we need to draw? Well, that's quite simply how far can the PCs travel in a given day. We know this. This is not new information. So what we have to decide upon is, okay, are the PCs going to be in a civilized area or in an uncivilized area? And this is going to have a major impact on their travel abilities. If you think about the wild, wild west in the US during the 1850s, 60s, 70s, 90s, and so on, it was a very rough and tumble area, and travel was as far as a horse could take you, or as far as a wagon drawn by horses or oxen could take you. But there were limited resupply routes, there were limited travel routes, there were certainly no wonderfully beautifully paved roads and the like. It was all very much a, well, we're going in that direction, folks, and we're going to try and move the wagons in that direction. So generally, journeying was very, very slow. This was during a period that you would consider civilized. Cut on the other hand to Europe at exactly the same time, and you've got over 2,000 years worth of road infrastructure in many of the southern parts of Europe, simply thanks to the Romans who went mad when building roads everywhere. But in the northern parts, it was still fairly rustic. To a degree, but you had nearly 400 years of major war going on between everyone, and wars generally lead to roads. To move an army, you need a nice, even, smooth surface to get them to move from point A to point B very, very quickly. So you develop good road systems. So there in Europe, you could move around from one country to another in the course of a single day if you were lucky and you kind of knew what road systems to use. So very different, very, very, very different kinds of mobility. At the same time, moving around in Europe, you were paying taxes as you were getting to each border post or each town for the use of those roads, the maintenance of those roads and things like that. So there is also an incredible cost that suddenly comes in, which you may not necessarily have anticipated before. I'm giving you various examples. So think about your world space. If your goal is to place the players in a world that they have to try and survive, or they're walking through a territory that has a species in it that doesn't have a huge amount of advanced technology, or is a pacifistic species where travel could be fairly slow and mundane because you don't have to move shock troops around the country very quickly, well, then the road infrastructure is not going to be so great, and that also means that your travel times slow down. On the other hand, we are in a fantasy environment, so perhaps travel time is through the air, perhaps they can fly, but then they're going to need roosting spots, they're going to need posts along the way. Do you see how, as you start to think about the questions of mobility, you start to then realize that the Romans could only build their giant road network because they had lots of little towns and hamlets and way stations along the way that you could stop at and that you could then refresh at. And if you look at most worlds, most spaces, as a matter of fact, your towns are situated at intervals that are at horse or walking pace in a day from one another. And it's only with modernization that those towns have merged into giant cities, which have turned in turn into metropolises that are just filled with what were once little towns, now a giant, giant megacity. Okay, so travel aside, we've now got travel. Okay, that's fine. Okay, now, we also need to look at our region and say, okay, if they can travel this far, we need to draw a country map, or we need to draw a kingdom map, or we need to draw a whatever. Okay, so we've kind of narrowed it down. Why don't we have to build the entire world before we start playing? Surely we need to know what trade is coming in from there and what's coming in from there and how these kingdoms work with one another. We do not unless you're playing a political game. We need to know that there are other kingdoms and nations out there. But if you think about it, once again, we go back to history, no one in Central Europe gave a fig what was happening in Central India during the time. So when you look at maps that come from that time period, they generally don't extend to those kind of outer regions because no one went there. There was trade happening. There was lots of trade happening all over the world. We know this for a fact. But no one knew where they were. It's like, oh, it comes from the Silk Road. Well, where does the Silk Road go? Well, it goes that way. And the map doesn't go much further than there because that's the last town that speaks our language or that is safe for us to travel to. So we don't have to worry about all of that kind of stuff. Also, we don't need to have this intense creation process going on for stuff that the players are never going to care about. When was the last time that one of your players sat down at your table and said, my character asks what the socio-economic policies are between our government and the Elvish Empire? I don't think that's ever come up in any one of my games almost ever, unless I was running a political game. So I think, personally, that drawing exactly what you need and not much further is really, really important. I find it also being incredibly useful because what it means is that you now can add to your world space as you need to. Imagine your players are going, oh, this is so much fun, but you know, we've heard these weird rumors of this upside down world that or mountain that's further out beyond the map. We want to know what's beyond the map. Oh, okay, well, they're interested in upside-down mountains, so now we can start to do that, if that's part of the physics of your world, remember. Okay, so we've looked at travel. We've looked at how much you need to add in. How do we then start? Well, the very best way to start, in my opinion, is to put pen to paper and to just sketch it out. Now, what shape do you go with? There are so many different ways that you could kind of create your map. Really, there are so many different ways. Personally, I like to take a pen or a mouse, whichever one you want to do, and I define the extremities of the country or the nation first. I kind of draw a vague outline and I'm like, okay, it's vaguely this kind of shape. Now, bearing in mind, countries, kingdoms, nations oftentimes would use rivers as natural borders. It's easier than drawing big red dotted lines on the ground, as we've seen in our own modern day world. Of course, this is a joke for those of you that don't know what borders look like. On the maps, they're red dotted lines. In reality, they're not. They're just pieces. There's nothing there, actually. So when we're drawing our maps, we want to take cognizance of the fact of our rivers. So generally speaking, what I will do is I will draw the landmass first, so the shape of the landmass. Then I will add in my mountains, because mountains are really useful. Mountains show you which direction your rivers flow in, because rivers flow from mountains down into the coastline. Generally speaking, that's how water works, unless your universe is different. So I try and express the natural laws and those kinds of things. Put in the mountains, put in the forests, put in the rivers, and then I stop, and you should stop too, because step 3 is about looking at the civilizations that are in that space. We don't want to yet fill the space with civilizations. We don't have to run yet. Let's walk first. What we then need to do is we need to very much express all of the laws of our world. So is there magic? We need to show this magic somehow. I hate the idea that magic exists as this force and that nature somehow just hasn't taken advantage of it. We know that physics exist in our universe and that the natural laws of geography follow those physics. It's not like water goes, you know what? I'm not going to use the laws of physics. Water uses the laws of physics. So waterfalls fall down. Water erodes through things. Water dissolves salts because that's what the laws state. So the rivers become slightly salty. They carry that salt down into the ocean where it stagnates and it becomes saltier. But we know there's the water cycles, etc., etc. The point I'm trying to make is that all of the laws of our universe get expressed on our planet. So we have to do the same thing. So when we're adding in a fantasy environment, we need to have fantasy environments. We need trees that go, well, they've absorbed magic. What is the effect of that magic on those trees? Well, maybe these trees migrate from one water source to another. Maybe that's what the magic has imbued them to do. They're not sentient, they just move. Or perhaps we have these areas where magic collects, and then things that grow in that area grow very, very differently, or they do become sentient. So then what happens if you have a whole bunch of sentient trees? They can't move necessarily, but they can have conversations, or they cast magic themselves. Surely, when we look at the monsters manuals of all of the role-playing games that we have, when there is a fantasy element, there should be natural creatures. And I say natural creatures because if you have a world where magic exists, that's a naturally occurring thing, by the way, folks. So you should have animals that then go, well, yes, this creature has a gland which allows it to detect the presence of magic, and it feasts off of things that have magic within them. This is where you are really world building. This is where you are figuring out what exactly it is and how exactly it is expressed in your world. We know that there are divine gods in most fantasy worlds. They have a real presence. So there should be examples of that. There should be mountains that may have been flattened out because that's where the gods actually do live. But if the gods live there, how would they have impacted that? And would they want humans or sentient little species to come knocking on their door? Surely they'd have giant walls of invisibility, or they'd have a cloud that's actually solid. How would that impact things? That cloud would be blown around. It would bump into mountains. So you might have some mountains that have got square tops. All of these things should just be washing through your head. That's why I love map making, is because we are literally just incorporating these creative elements. We're letting our minds wander and say, well, yes, actually, what if the world was like this? Why should it look like a London, or not even London? Why should it look like the Lake District of Central England, or the Lochs of Scotland? Why should it look like that? If there are these creatures that live there, they should live there for a reason, right? And if there's magic, they should live there for a reason. And then finally, we have to express our tone. We really, really have to express our tone in our maps. We have to say, right, well, this map has this tone, or this map has that tone. My tone is grimdark, so I need to have grimdark stuff. What's a grimdark mountain? That is a very jagged, sharp mountain, but it is also not a nice flowing mountain with lots of sand on it. It's a shale, hard, schist-covered mountain that has sharp edges or glass. In my worlds, like the world behind me of Braxia, I have a desert that's made out of salt, and the salt crystals will cut through your skin. So you have to wear these special boots that have got these little curved things, almost like ice skates, but that they actually stand on top of the ice crystals and they get worn down, because if you walk on them with the leather boots, those leather boots will be worn through within a day and your feet will be cut to shreds within moments and you will be desiccated because you're walking on salt. You will be drained of all of that water within your body within moments. It's an incredibly inhospitable place. It's a very dark kind of setting, even though it's very, very bright, to the point that you actually have to wear goggles, otherwise you go blind. Do you see what I'm driving at here? So you want to incorporate your tone into your world map. Now, hopefully, if I've been doing this right, there should be a video playing somewhere where I have been drawing this landmass as I have been talking. And hopefully you'll see that I'm expressing ideas of a dark and grim tone. I think that's kind of really the one that we all love. I have this idea for my world space where the players are going to be stuck inside a warring kingdom. I want to explore this idea of war and conflict. So I'm going to make a space where the players are restricted in their movement. I'm keeping them to the lower half of the continent, and then they will be able to move further north later on. But I want to have almost 3 very different nations at war, and I want the players to be involved in that war. So I need to try and create these very distinct areas that have very distinct looks to them and that embody the tone and the themes and the ideas that I have to try and demonstrate that. Anyway, we're not talking civilizations. That's next week when we come back. We talk about adding civilizations and looking at how they're going to impact the world. For now, it's just about creating our world space. So my challenge to you, go and create a world space. Go and create, even if you are running a game that is filled with that you've already been running for a while, or that you have you're using a pre-generated thing, that's fine. Go create this one. You are never at disadvantage when you are using a map that you have made, or you are never at disadvantage when you have made a map, because it means that you can go, hey, let's do a one-shot in this world that I've made. So go create a map, go make a map, sit down for 3 or 4 hours, just take the time for yourself, enjoy the process of exploring this idea in your head and then expressing it on the page or on the screen, however you're going to be doing it. That's my challenge to you. So this is the map that I managed to create with these ideas in mind. Hopefully there are some things that you're looking at going, oh, that's interesting. What's happening there? That's a curious thing. What's going on there? I want to look at that a bit more. Let's explore there. And that's really what we want. You're going to see in 2 or 3 weeks' time, as a matter of fact, why we do this, why we want people to look at the maps and go, oh, that's curious, that's interesting, I want more of that. But not just yet. And that's it from me for now. A massive, massive thank you to you for watching the video. Just a reminder that if you do want to get that Epic Battle Maps Volume 1, to use the word Epic Loot 10 code when you go onto the website, as that will give you a 10% discount on buying those. I suggest you get 2. You can lie them next to each other and have a lot of fun. I've used them for D&D in a Castle. I've used them for my other games. They really are super, super handy. Until next time, I wish you and yours the very happiest of gaming.